Gwyn, parry to win. Definitely don't lose multiple runs to this fight in poor planning. Turns out Crystal Halberd is best here. Try spending some souls on strength to one-hand the Crystal Halberd, and you'll have beaten Dark Souls without dying or using glitches. It's simply that easy!
Man, f*** TikTok, right? So, that sucked. Turns out, Deathless runs are hard, long, and will threaten to spread you to your limits. I know, sounds like a good Thursday night, but imagine all of those things together as a bad thing. Also, that maybe doing this while having daily panic attacks is probably the worst decision possible. In that case, howdy, I'm Prakuza, and welcome to DevBox, where today we're checking the behind the scenes on a run that almost killed me. So, to start this out, let's look at where my first death took place. Duke's Archives. Yeah, this was a tragic one. This first run had 3 more deaths in it in total, one at Seath himself because the clams made it into the arena, so I changed up my strategy there when it came to it. The next was in Tomb of the Giants, trying to get to the second bonfire, so I decided to not go for that at all. Finally was Gwyn himself. Nothing to be done to make this easier. Gwyn RNG gonna be Gwyn RNG. I'll be honest, on the run that succeeded, we kinda simply prayed for luck. We did learn a lot in this attempt, however. First, this proved that the +5 halberd certainly has the staying power to make it to Sen's Fortress. However, once I got in there, I was really struggling. At this point, in a casual run, you should ideally be on the way to +10, and the snakes are all very resistant to our damage. I think blunt would be better here, but I've really never tested. Parrying with a more upgraded weapon tends to do the job on its own. Either way, this makes Sen's Fortress pretty tough on the first attempt, and Tarkus becomes kind of necessary when going on this route. And here I thought he was only added for a joke. The other main learning moment of that first run is with the Crystal Halberd. For one, getting the halberd moves our damage from manageable to straight up good. However, the weapon is a bit more brittle than I originally expected. I knew about the crystal durability debuff, but I didn't expect it to be this bad. And so relying entirely on it is kind of a problem. If you've already seen the previous video, then you know what the fix was when we got here on future attempts. But yeah, the Crystal Halberd is a mixed bag and doesn't even require us to have much strength or dex to make good use of it. Although not being able to one-hand the weapon will be a problem later. 16 strength isn't crazy, get there. So, with that first run out of the way and many lessons learned, let's go over the actual run and the rules I'll be following for my first Deathless attempt through Dark Souls 1. The route itself is simple. We're going any %, which means if we can skip bosses, we will. That means no Gaping Dragon, no Demon Fire Sage, and certainly nothing as off the beaten path as Priscilla. Instead, we'll be gearing up with the halberd, which we'll be getting at +5 right away, and giving ourselves the stats to wield it in 2 hands. Some supplemental finds are the Wolf Ring and Elite Knight Armor. The armor isn't as important since we'll find some other stuff to wear eventually, but it can be good if you're willing to be risky. For instance, on the first few attempts, we went for the Havel's Ring to be able to wear the armor, but yeah, that ended one run really early, which axed that from the run entirely, as it was deemed too high of a risk for too little reward moving forward. Next up, we're on the boss rush, Gargoyles into Quelaag into Ceaseless Cheese, giving us access to Sen's Fortress and tons of souls to spend on levels. The +5 halberd can handle all 3 of these fights no problem. There's probably a better option for Quelaag, but the halberd is fine. Then, Sen's Fortress sends us to fight Iron Golem with Iron Tarkus, and pick up the Lightning Spear for future runs. This will be our ad killer, while the Crystal Halberd coming up will be for bosses only. With the Crystal Halberd, we can quickly clean up ONS and open up access to the rest of the map. The final 4 will be tackled in a bit of a strange order, but I chose Four Kings, Seath, Bed of Chaos, Nito. The reason for this was because New Londo had lots of Titanite chunks for upgrading or repairing the Crystal Halberd. Seath has a humanity farming location and a free Firekeeper soul to upgrade our flask. Using the shortcut for Bed of Chaos gives us the Sunlight Maggot to make traversal into the Tombs of the Giants easier. I'm pretty used to Tomb of the Giants without a light source, but I didn't want to take unnecessary risks in this run, so getting the Light Helmet was a huge benefit. As for the rules, we're going for a glitchless run, and I'm using a pretty narrow view of what glitchless means. Some skips that speedrunners wouldn't consider glitches, like Seath skip, to get past his automatic death for example, that's off limits, because I personally consider it a glitch. Even for the rolling on the elevator method, you wind up falling through the floor at a certain point. In addition to removing skips and glitches, I also decided to go for one of Team Hitless's rules, specifically no quitting out. Very often that can be a saving grace to keep myself alive when I'm either in over my head or about to fall to my death. For this run, if I made a mistake that would get me killed, we're counting that as a death, even if quitting out could technically avoid the actual death. So, while the first run taught me how this could go right and gave me some ideas for how to improve, the next few runs would show me exactly how terrible it could go in all of the areas where I didn't know I was taking some pretty serious risks. Let's start breaking this down with one run where I die to Dwayne Let's Fuck Up Moana Johnson himself. Yeah, it turns out needing to get 5 parries in a row without failing a single time is a bit of a risk. So that's out of the running now. No more attempts for Havel's Ring from any of the runs from now on. It's not worth the risk. And while I do normally have more of a let's see the run through to the end mindset when practicing like this, that was a kick in the stomach right in the beginning, and I wouldn't come back for another day. The next run the next day would at least make it a little farther, all the way to Gargs, in fact. Yeah, that's way farther. Another reset. Awesome. Honestly, the worst part about all of these resets is knowing that the 30 minutes of setup are waiting for me the next time I pick it up. Kind of an incentive to do more than one in a day, but I've got a book to write. I ain't got 12 hours a day to dedicate to 3-ish attempts at this run. So instead, I waste way more time for days resetting when I initially fail and continue to get rusty in the later half of the game, because at this point I've stopped practicing anything after Sen's Fortress. Do not do this if you are attempting this run. Practice the whole thing, even if you die. Speaking of Sen's Fortress, can you guess where the next resets might be? Yep, Iron Golem. Even though I've been summoning Iron Tarkus here. Honestly, picking this guy up for this fight was mostly a joke, especially when I've got the Lightning Spear at the ready. That's the spear infused with lightning damage, by the way, not Lightning Spear, the super OP Miracle. That build would be wild to try for a Deathless run. No, I'm not doing that run. Let someone better and crazier than me go for it. Anyway, yeah, dying here is pretty heinous, especially considering how I die. Barely sliding off the edge of the arena. Like, maybe stop moving and I'll be fine. Not sure why I keep fucking slipping. After having made it all the way to Duke's Archives on my first run, all of these early failures are insanely demoralizing. But I'm used to this. Like Mama reminds me every day, she says, "Proc, honey, you're a failure." And I've already come this far, because that's the funny thing about failing at something long enough. Sometimes, if you play your cards right, you can stack up enough failures into one bona fide success. Alright, well, I guess it's time to dive into the big one. The one where I get the win. Shit, not that one. There we go. So we've already gone over our pathing, but let's break down a little bit more succinctly this time. As if this was actually meant to be a guide of some sort, for anyone crazy enough to actually want to go for the Deathless run. Or at least my wonked up version of it. Also, a side note, we'll be watching the full unedited fights so that we can see each encounter from start to finish. My normal lighter editing style will be coming in during the traversal phases. First off, we'll be picking the Thief as our starting class and take the Black Firebombs as our starting gift. This choice is mostly being made for speed reasons, because the faster you can beat the game would also happen to be Deathless. So the two runs really do share quite a bit of DNA. We get through the asylum very fast, even opening the lower door to make sure we can get back up here quickly on a return visit during the gearing up phase. Now, for maximum speed, I believe that dropping down on the asylum demon with a plunging attack and then killing it with firebombs is actually a bit quicker than killing it with the firebombs alone on the first attempt at the boss, before getting a weapon in Estus. Waiting until now also has the added benefit of being much safer, since we can heal up any damage we take with that aforementioned Estus. Some runs go faster here, and I learned in one attempt that trying to throw the firebombs while off to the side like this causes some aiming issues. So if you find yourself at this angle, don't bother to lock on. Free aiming for those chunky thighs will be a much better option. Next up, we're in the gearing up phase, and this is where things start to get tedious, but rarely stressful. Aside from that one death against Havel, nothing here ever kills me, even if the giant statue man on the path to getting the wolf ring threatened to on more than one attempt. Either way, what we're looking for here is the halberd, the longbow, the wolf ring, optionally the elite knight armor while we're here, and enough souls to wield and upgrade our weapon to +5. We also make a quick trip back to the Undead Asylum to pick up the rusted iron ring for easier Blighttown traversal later on. This is also a great time to mention the Black Knight halberd, which we can get on this pathing and is actually one of the strongest weapons, if not the strongest weapon, in the game. So obviously, this would be great for this run. However, for the sake of the video, I wanted to make sure that we're using methods that require the least amount of farming, grinding, and RNG. I want this to be repeatable in a way where if you do give this run a try, you won't have to reset in the first 20 minutes because the correct weapon didn't drop. Funny enough, I do actually get it on the winning run, but for various reasons, it never makes it into any fights, even if it would have been a massive improvement for some encounters. This then takes us to the gargoyles. If I had to give a reason to the death I took here, aside from getting stuck in a wombo combo, I'd have to say that it's mostly caused by me getting distracted. I'm trying new strategies in the middle of a run, specifically with the extra black firebombs that will otherwise never get used at any point in this run. It's not exactly a great idea to try out new strats while in the middle of a hard reset run like this. That's what practice is for. I should probably download one of the practice mods now that I play on PC. Oh well. As for the actual fight through these two, the biggest problem I have is kind of the fact that I'm learning a new weapon. I don't often use the regular halberd. I have used the Black Knight halberd plenty, but that weapon has a lot more sweeping attacks rather than this poke, and the difference in the width of the hitbox takes some getting used to. Otherwise though, the damage is incredible, and as long as I can get the hits off, usually by ignoring the tail I always want to cut, then it's pretty easy to take the first gargoyle down before the second one has even arrived. After the Gargs, we head down and kill Laudric for his Fap ring, and can make our descent into Quaelag's domain. Now, a normal run against Quaelag usually means dropping down into Blighttown, running through the swamp real quick, and then using the moss we collected while hunting down the wolf ring to get rid of our poison. Interesting note for this final run, we actually got toxicked by the poison dart guys on the way in, who I'd been avoiding at this point by the way, even though they are guarding a extremely valuable item, another Firekeeper soul, and we didn't have a blooming purple moss to mitigate the toxic. So we're spam healing and hoping for a miracle against Quaelag the whole time. I won't lie to you, I definitely thought that this was going to be another quick end to a run, because I figured there was no way I could survive the toxic long enough for it to either end on its own, or for Quaelag to die. Turns out though, keeping an eye on survival was actually the key to this one. Certainly helped by the fact that I always keep a few spare humanities in my back pocket to heal when the Estus isn't going to be enough. Fortunately, Quaelag gives plenty of opportunities to pop the much slower heal throughout the fight, and I'm able to get through this with only a little puckering of the old anus. Sorry for the visual, but I was nervous, okay? Also, this fight is really long, especially because my damage is kinda low, so I'm kinda talking for the sake of it now. Almost there, I'm sure. And there she goes. While we're here, we take out Ceaseless because he drops enough souls to buy half a Warhammer. And it only takes quickly running away, followed by 6 hits in order to get him to die. Oh, for anyone who's had trouble getting the cheese to work by the way, there are 2 key features to do it. First, you have to make it all the way to where the corpse with the witch's clothes are, even if you come back to reattempt this fight after having already picked up the clothes. Second, you need to get all the way to the door. If you don't get far enough, then Ceaseless will simply fire blast you until you either run all the way back or fight him normally. Also, be careful when he lands with the arm out before kicking him off the ledge. This attack has some wonky hitboxes that actually peel around from closer to the door, so make sure not to get clipped by that. After this, we can homeward bone all the way back up to Firelink Shrine. This does mean we'll have to make the trip back down in order to get into Lost Izalith, but in my experience, going up is always riskier than going down. So it's worth it to skip the warpable bonfire here right now and come back later. With both bells rung, we can head directly into Sen's Fortress. Now, while we're definitely moving fast and have the damage to survive Sen's Fortress if we're careful, the +5 halberd is really starting to drop off here. So before we get to the top, this is when we want to use a Lloyd's Talisman to get the Lightning Spear. It's much better at fighting the enemies here than the halberd, and will be useful against most enemies throughout the rest of the game. While I skipped this on my first attempt, this will actually become our workhorse for the remainder of the successful run, because we want to save our main weapon for bosses only. At the top of Sen's Fortress, we get Iron Golem. Now, you've already seen that I'm summoning Tarkus for this fight, and that's mostly because the NPC can essentially beat this guy on his own. I'll be honest though, it's more for the bit of the original video anyway. Since I know a lot of folks have a lot of feelings about whether or not using summons of any sort counts as beating any of these games. I find that shit toxic as fuck, so here's a summon in a Deathless run to say, play your own way. You want to use the OP easy mode of sorceries? Go for it. You want to summon NPCs or even friends? Go for it. Don't let anyone tell you that you're playing wrong simply because you didn't use their arbitrary rules that ignores several systems and mechanics built directly into the game. Alright, now that I'm off my soapbox, the Iron Golem is off his feet and tumbling over the side. I told you Tarkus could kill this dude on his own. The run that died here, in fact, did so because I didn't trust him, and was running wildly without joining in on the attacks like I should have. Alright, now we get to Anorlando, kind of the main event, so to speak. First off, we're getting our primary weapon for the remainder of the run. That would be the Crystal Halberd, found in another Mimic, which we can open with another Lloyd's Talisman. Again, this is for safety. It's not like mimics are difficult to kill or anything, but avoiding as many fights as possible is definitely the way to avoid death as long as possible. Now, as I run past enemies like the lightning gargoyles, let's go over the pros and cons of the Crystal Halberd. Pro number 1, it's strong as fuck. Con number 1, it's brittle as fuck. That is the end of the pros and cons of the Crystal Halberd. Yeah, pretty much, this is one of the strongest pickups available in the game, and without even upgrading the weapon, it can take out everything from the 4 Kings to Gwyn. Although, it would be better if I could actually one-hand it. We'll get to that. The only real problem is that it only has 20 durability, and it cannot be repaired without spending Titanite chunks to upgrade it. This starts with 1 chunk twice, then progressively goes up until you get to a slab on the final upgrade. We won't ever be getting that far, though. This durability problem, however, is why we'll be consistently using the Lightning Spear on normal enemies and pulling out the Halberd against bosses. Like these two. And it's time for ONS. As we can see, the damage of the Crystal Halberd does some work here. However, making sure to stay alive is the real task in this fight. I feel like the difficulty of these two kind of goes without saying, but yeah, making sure to try keeping them separated is good for survivability here. Either way, this is a long, drawn-out fight due to the fact that it's 2 fucking dudes, and getting greedy here will absolutely end in disaster. Ideally, this should actually be the biggest milestone of this run, but for the runs that made it this far, I never actually died against ONS, surprisingly. I would also note that I could have summoned Solaire here if I wanted, even though I never talked to him. I did notice his sign while I was heading into the fight, or I could have actually thought ahead and went to try talking to him at some point before getting here. Probably sometime before Sen's Fortress would have been fine. So, if keeping track of both is going to be a problem, go ahead and pick the Sunbro up. He can be a huge help for diverting attention in the first phase. Absolutely makes up for their increased health when you summon. After the long first phase, we do finally get to the second phase against Super Smo. And it's all easy street from here. Sure, he's still got that stupid scoop attack that I absolutely despise, but he doesn't use it too often if we stay up in his face for the whole fight. Then, Smo being a big boy also works in our favor, since his massive hitbox means that my terrible aim with the halberd stops being a problem. Neat. So glad that this phase goes much quicker than the first one. Now we can collect the Lord Vessel from Booby Lady and head out towards the final 4. While we're warping around too, we can grab a few important items like the rare Ring of Sacrifice behind Rickard and the Occult Club from the Mimic by the Havel armor in the secret dark room of Anorlando. From here, we want to go for 4 kings, and while I was smart enough to consider that immediately after killing ONS in my first run, I completely forgot the pathing in my final run. Which meant that to get to Sif, we need to go down to the Catacombs in order to kill Pinwheel for some free souls. The Occult Club, devolved down to its Divine +5 form, helps against the skeletons in the Catacombs, but I really should have swapped to either the Spear or the Halberd against Pinwheel himself. Boy, that would have been embarrassing if I actually died against Pinwheel, especially with a health bar like mine right now. I'm pretty sure I have more health than the boss, and yet I still managed to nearly fuck it up with this stupid club. My demise spelled out so clearly by my own hubris. But not to worry, we still get the kill and can head into Tomb of the Giants to warp out of here and get the first bonfire, so we don't have to make the drop into the Catacombs again. Yeah, this descent into the Tomb of the Giants definitely goes exactly as I expect. Definitely didn't accidentally fall, then need to work entirely on instinct to get me to the bonfire since my thinking brain was too busy shitting itself to actually control my fingers. Okay, with that part done, we can go fight Sif. And we've already come to where the +0 Crystal Halberd starts to fall off damage-wise. Like, this isn't terrible damage. In fact, on a casual playthrough, this would be totally acceptable. However, considering that I'm used to absolutely obliterating this doggo, I almost feel weak dealing this amount to her. I mean, it's not like Sif is known for being especially tanky, so why the hell does this take this long to get through the fight? Worse still is how difficult it is to actually land any hits with the low stab of the Halberd's moveset. Yep, this right here, this is another case of how much better the Black Knight Halberd would have been. And would you look at that, it's still there in my inventory. Gathering dust. You know what? Executive decision here. If the weapon drops for you on your Deathless run, definitely use it. Even if you never hit +5, it's so much better than anything else you'll pick up. Damn. With Sif dead, we can head into New Londo Ruins. Normally, I like to run through here and hope for the best. However, we're like an hour and a half into this run, and I'm not looking to die. So congratulations, New Londo, I'm actually treating you the way Miyazaki always intended. Stabbing everything I see to death before actually moving forward. Because as we can see on the ladder at the end of this place, trying to rush will only get us killed. I mean, it's entirely possible to rush this, but it's so RNG dependent that we can't afford to rush right now. However, after clearing out as many enemies as we can comfortably drain the water and head down to pick up some free Titanite chunks. Well, free if you consider killing 2 Dark Wraiths to be a no-cost action. Because it's fun. Time for the 4 kings, I guess. You know, I normally save these guys for the end of most runs because they're such a DPS check, but like, we're really not getting much stronger now, so it really doesn't matter what order we show up here at. This might also be a good time to explain how we've been spending our souls for this entire run. While the first 2 levels were spent getting the strength we needed to use the halberd, every other level has been spent on vitality and endurance. At this point, we're at about 35 vitality and 20 endurance. For the most part, we've been leveling like this because the halberds don't have the best scaling for either strength or dex. I mean, bad scaling doesn't necessarily mean no scaling, but it's still low enough that I can pretty much not bother with extra strength and dex and focus instead on extra survivability with all of this health, stamina, and carry weight. Because this means that we can wear better armor and have higher defense that way as well. I mean, that doesn't mean we've got a decent roll with Havel's armor on here, but it's at least enough to make getting through the 4 kings kind of a breeze, actually. Also, while we could have been improving our damage a bit, we can already see that our overall strength is fine, considering that we're able to kill each of the 4 kings before the next one spawns. Our RNG here is pretty good too, as they don't use too much of the magic that deals the most damage with this build. However, I do get grabbed once, which I would argue is actually the worst thing they can do to us right now. We're going to need every humanity we can get at a certain point, which means that losing any to the 4 kings is kind of a pain. That being said, we only lose 1 to the grab, so it absolutely could have gone much worse for us here. Either way, we get through the fight with a few Estus to spare even. Turns out, passing the DPS check wasn't as hard as I always assume when I save these guys for last. After the fight, we can also talk to Kaith? The other primordial serpent, non-framped. Not framped. There we go. For the chance to not only drop off the Lord Vessel, but also so that we can join the Dark Wraiths for the Dark Hand. This will come in handy in a bit, so put a pin in it for now. Time for our next Lord Soul, which in this case means Seath. We've already gone over my thoughts on doing the skip to get past the scripted death against Seath, but to reiterate, I chose to value the glitchless aspect of this run over the deathless. And so, a scripted death gets to stay, since getting past it requires manipulating the geometry in a way that I might argue is a glitch, since we literally clip through the floor if we do it. This was also the location of my very first deaths on the various attempts for this run. I've learned a few things as a result, including the fact that getting the boar stuck even gives us an easy kill, and some tasty drip. Seriously, this might be the hottest look I've ever seen in this game. And the boar head is like 80% of that. After using the rare ring we found in Sen's Fortress to keep our souls and hopefully not get cursed, we also surprisingly stay in unhallowed form. So yeah, Deathless confirmed. Neat. We can also farm for humanities in the library if we need to, so it was actually better for us to go the legit way anyway. We'll get to the why on that in a minute. For now, we need to go kill Seath. I was actually pretty worried about this guy, since he was my second death on that first attempt of the run. The real problem comes from the fact that I still don't want to use any quitouts. This means that the only way to not have to deal with the clams in the fight is to kill them before we get there. However, the lightning spear is not really up to the task of killing them. So we go ahead and deal with the fact that they'll be joining us and instead focus them down before really trying to fight Seath in any significant way. Once we're through the clams, however, it is now a fight against Seath, which he isn't exactly the most difficult fight on its own. The roughest part is where he does the big crystal AoE, or of course when I absolutely misread the distance of his attacks and he nearly kills me that way. Alright, well, once I manage to get my fucking shit together, we can wail on that big ball of his and pretty safely punish against most attacks in order to keep the damage going. It's a risky fight, and this certainly isn't the cleanest execution I've ever had against Seath, but without the clams being a problem, this guy was never really going to be a hard wall to get past in this run. With Seath finished off quickly, we need to get our final remaining humanities together. We're looking for a total of 30, so we can head down to Quaelag's sister to open the shortcut to Lost Isolith. There are a few decent sources for humanity right now, including the hentai monsters in the Duke's archives. However, we can also go straight for the source and use that dark hand we got from Not Framped to suck it directly from Petrus's face. Don't feel too bad about this one. This asshole abandoned the maiden he was duty-bound to protect and will even murder her if given the chance. To think that he even had humanity to begin with is honestly giving him too much credit. Alright, with the 30 soft humanity in hand, we can head through the big door, kill the red-eyed maggot for the sunlight maggot hat, that for some reason doesn't drive us crazy like it does Solaire. Finally, we can head down to fight the Bed of Chaos. And by fight, I mean we can throw 2 firebombs and instantly get the kill. This starts by standing 6 blocks away from the edge of the arena, use a bow to aim for 2 specific branches, then throw the firebombs while pointing towards those landmarks. The result is an easy kill that definitely won't go terribly. I mean, it's not like the boss can suddenly cast a mass firestorm inside of the tunnel where the bug is if we take too long in getting there. In case you can't detect the sarcasm, please move quickly. This boss cheats and absolutely will kill you if you fail to kill him in time. This leaves us with only one more Lord Vessel to gather, and we now have the Sunlight Maggot and the Tomb of the Giants bonfire already discovered. That leaves us with a quick run through the dark before we get to the boss. Quick note, this was in fact one of my deaths in my first attempt as well. And yeah, it is not worth going for the second bonfire here on a Deathless run. It's much easier to simply run through here and avoid as much combat as possible. The giant all fours skeletons, not worth engaging with. Time to kill Nito. This fight can be divided into 2 phases. First, we'll use our Divine +5 club to kill his skeletons, taking them out of the fight for good with only about 2 hits, but I go for 3 for good measure, making sure that I get them good and gone. if Nido happens to be the one to deal the final attack, then they'll still get up and you'll have to kill them again. A backstab can also take them out right away. Seriously, these little skeletons are pretty weak considering that they're all the way at the end of the Tomb of the Giants. Guess FromSoft decided to be nice and make them easier to deal with since they're the annoying adds for an otherwise pretty easy boss. Speaking of the boss, fighting him is the second phase, which starts when the skeletons are all dead and we can start using the Crystal Halberd again, this time to rip this dude apart. At this point, we're at +2 since we've gotten pretty close to breaking the weapon a couple times now, and that is more than enough to make short work of Nido, getting us the kill in record time. Record for me, not like world record speed time. This whole run takes like a total of 4 hours. That's bottom of the barrel on the leaderboard for speed. Still, it's a pretty good fight, and we can head on through once we're finally done. With Nido dead, however, that means we only have one boss left to fight, Gwyn himself. Sure would suck to die against him here and have to fully reset, right? If only we had a foolproof plan that couldn't possibly fail, no matter how RNG decides to absolutely fuck with me. Can you tell that I was sweating buckets at this point? Yeah, I'm quoting Brave Fencer Musashi. You gonna do something about that? Like watch a Brave Fencer Musashi retro respect? Because I would love to make one. Give me some time to cook, okay? Anyway, Gwyn offers some strangeness for this build, because I never actually gave myself enough strength to one-hand the halberd. Do not do what I have done. I only need like 4 more levels at this point, and I would be able to one-hand this thing and kill him so much easier. And yet, I don't have any spare souls to do it now. And I'm not looking to farm Black Knights to get those final few levels. So, in order to get the parry strat to work, I attempt some other weapons, like the Lightning Spear, which does next to no damage, oh goodness. Or the Bandit Knife, since it has such high critical damage. It's also a +0 starting weapon, which means that it also does next to no damage. This is not going well. Eventually, after testing and testing and testing how to kill this guy, in the middle of the fight, at the very end of a Deathless run by the way, you know, a great time to test shit, I realized that the parry swap to two-handing then riposte combo is the best option I have. I will say I never really figure out which is the better time to go back to one-handing though. Not sure if I should be doing it before or after taking the swig from the Estus to lure out Gwyn's slow two-handed swing. Regardless, I somehow get this? Yeah, after all that fumbling, I'm as surprised as you are. By all rights, that should not have worked. Once again, if you're trying to follow along for your own Deathless run, level strength to one-hand the halberd. And there we have it, a successful any percent glitchless Deathless run of Dark Souls Remastered, using mostly halberds in order to absolutely slap the dicks off like half of the game, and then struggle through everything else. With this guidance at hand, you can also get through this ridiculous, mind-numbing run that you should absolutely not do while already mentally compromised. And hey, if you do try, then you can get it done in as little as 6 attempts, if we count starting with Twin Humanities on accident as a failed attempt. This is, of course, if you're as amazing at this game as I myself am. You know, the guy who almost died to fucking Pinwheel and lost a run to Havel. Ugh. Geez, maybe don't take my advice and plan out your own route. Hey, it's that time again. The end of the video where I invite folks to come check out the Patreon. Link in the description, and make good on the rewards for those currently pledged. Patreon members get early access to new content and their names written in the credits at the end of videos. And those who pledge in the top tiers get their names read out, like our DevBox designers, Genghis Braun, and our DevBox developers, Azul. Thanks for your support, and thanks for watching.